All right, we are talking about Cav, so I'm happy we're doing the Cav tutorial. We're actually redoing it. It's been about 2.5 years since I've done this, and now feels like the right time to do a number of these tutorials again with everything I've learned playing Grand Tactician in the time since. So we're going to spend most of our time in battle, but before we do that, we want to make sure that we get our projects right. We want to get things right at the kind of strategic level so that everything runs smoothly at the tactical level. The two projects I say you absolutely got to get is Cav Reform. Otherwise, you're stuck with very small detachments of Cav, but these give you the full Cav brigades, and you want to get medium range carbines. Those are the best. If you want to spend extra money on Cav carbines that just aren't as good, that's up to you, but I would not recommend it. When you get medium range carbines, these are going to be your options. The Mater is generally regarded as the best. I also really like the Jocelyn. The Merrill might be the weakest of those three brothers, but at 300 yards, mediocre accuracy, and 9 rounds a minute, it still ain't bad. Anyways, those are your options, so pick however you want. On OOB, I will say it's up to you. I think the way that a lot of you are going to start campaigns, you're going to start not with core, but with armies. And so they're going to look more or less like one of these three. And I like to have a separate division with 1 or 2 brigades per. This is a late war scenario, and so I have a lot of cav and a lot of armies, and so to try to not cheese, I'm only doing 1 brigade per division. But I would say probably early on in a campaign, I would probably have 2 cav brigades in each cav division. Some people will have their own separate cavalry corps, and they'll send it off on missions. That's fine and up to you. There are different ways to do it, but I want to have my cav on hand when it's time to fight, because that's what we're going to be focusing on in this video. I also like that I want the highest ranking officers possible to try to be from that branch. There's game reasons to do it, which is that there's a benefit to having the officers fit the branch of arms that they're commanding. And for role-playing reasons, I like to try to do it. But if you want to try to do a kind of a historical playthrough, then don't be tied to that. One last thing I would mention on the campaign layer, once you actually get Cav, ignore the core thing, pretend it's an army. Once you actually get Cav in there, click Scout, and it will do a lot of intelligence gathering as your Cav is out scouting and increases readiness. It will help on the campaign map and in battle. What you got to do, though, is not be engaged with the army or corps, whatever it is, still in scouting. You got to click it off before you end up in battle. Otherwise, if you're going to show up as reinforcements, you are going to show up ridiculously late. It's not going to make any sense, but that's just the way that the game works. All right, those are the main concerns I'd want to address on the campaign level. With that squared away, we're ready to hop into battle and see how to get the most bang for our buck from these cav. All right, so in the deployment phase, you want to find your cav and move them out in the direction you think the enemy is going to be. So if you're not familiar with this, the arrows, so we're playing in CSA, so the blue arrows tell you the likely or the possible direction, I guess, of the enemy movement onto the battlefield. And so it seems like it's generally northeast, and so moving up this way from the main body would be right. You want to save yourself some time is to kick out scouts here, and right, they're actually vedettes, but that's fine. You can move the rest of the force up. That's not really what's too important at the moment. All right, folks, here we are on the campaign map, and I'm going to try to keep this short. Inevitably, I won't, but I do want to try to be comprehensive without babbling too much. So in the deployment phase, there's quite a bit you need to do, and this is true of the cavalry and other things. Cavalry don't operate in isolation, and so you need to figure out what is it that you're looking to do here when you get into battle. You know you're defending, right, in this battle. We know that we're ahead on the victory bar there, so that's okay. We're sitting on the victory point. There are no other victory points. What you would learn from reading the HQ report is that we're down about 2 to 1 and 20,000 men, but reinforcements are coming. And so we're going to get about 40,000 more troops in the next 6 hours or so, and then we're going to get another 20,000. The Union, for its part, will get one more batch of 20,000, and so they're going to peak at 60,000. So eventually we're going to have a 20,000 man advantage. So what all that is kind of telling you is that you're looking to defend and kind of stall early on. That's not always going to be the case. And so when you need to attack, it's going to call for some slightly different tactics, but not really that much. So in this battle, and I would say it's true of most your deployment phases, things I tend to do when I remember, I will take the Cav division and I'll go ahead and detach it, because if I need to move and want to give maybe army or corps commands, it's the infantry and the artillery, I don't want to have the Cav dragged back from whatever they're doing. And the other thing I try to remember to do is to kick out the Cav vedettes or the Cav scouts, and what they do is that increases your line of sight. In the deployment bubble that you have, you want to move them to where you think the enemy is, because the first task here, once we hit go, is to go find the enemy, especially since we know that we are on the defense. I kind of like to know how close they are, and so we're going to do that. If we're playing with order delays on, you also need to take the additional step here to make sure that you're keeping pretty tight the distance between the commanders. The last thing I would say before we're ready to hit play is that my initial inclination is probably to defend maybe this set of woods over here and then this set of woods over here, because our reinforcements are either going to come from the south, and so they're going to be on our right, they're going to come from our west and be on our left, or they're going to come from the southwest, in which case they can fortify the center. We don't know. I'm probably not going to take my artillery with us, and so I know this has nothing to do with cavalry, but it does cut down on the micro you need to do when you're actually in combat, so it can help cav, which are frequently the micro-intensive option, and so I like to detach artillery during the deployment phase because it's instantaneous. We'll sit it back here to kind of play a little bit of defense. We don't expect anybody to rush up immediately on our right, and so I think it's pretty safe to leave them out here, and then we'll start moving this infantry where I think we might need them, but we're going to have to press play to find out. All right, so Grand Tactician tends to be pretty generous with its line of sight, and so our Cav scouts out here found this seems to be the direction that they're coming from. That's fine to know. That's a good ways away from where we are now. It doesn't really change too much of our plan to meet them. We're going to want to wait and see how they kind of come through here. We're going to keep it going at a relatively slow pace. Things aren't going to change all that much, but this is the point in the video where I kind of just got to go through some points, and then maybe we'll have a chance to see it apply in a little bit. So when you get used to Cav, you'll find what I think I and others have found who play quite a bit is that Cav are great on the attack and they are superb on the defensive. One of the things people tend to forget that's kind of very basic about Cav is that they can actually construct their own breastworks. What has to happen though is they have to be dismounted. If you've kicked out Cav scouts and you're trying to dismount, but it's not giving you the option, the reason is that you need to recall the Cav scouts to the parent unit and then you dismount. And once you've dismounted your Cav, you'll then have the option to construct breastworks. And so these guys can go out if they find, I don't know, if there isn't a lot of natural cover as there is in this map, they can go out and they can build that on their own. And so that's a little bit of help. They're best used, in my view, dismounted and in loose formation with those medium range Cav carbines. If you can get them in cover as well, that's fantastic. If you can't, it's not a big deal. Generally, you would prefer to have a unit like Cav who are really heavy hitters. You don't want them taking too many casualties, but if they're in loose formation, they take fewer casualties than if they're just dismounted but in a compact formation. And they also get an accuracy buff if they are in loose formation. Another thing we'll see later is that they have a morale buff aura for friendlies and a debuff aura for enemies. And so the wider you are, the further that aura will extend both to friendlies and to enemies, and that's something you would look to do. The downside to being in loose formation is that you are unwieldy to move. And so trying to move long distances in loose formation, Cav sprites, the other downside, you would think that Cav are really maneuverable, but actually the Cav sprites in this game are prone to get stuck and just go straight up unresponsive more than the other types of units that you're able to command. And so you need to know that, especially if you're playing with order delays on. If you get into kind of a hairy situation, you can see that I'm kind of kiting backwards and I'm not kind of letting them get very close at all, because I've seen Cav just completely bug out, mounted, dismounted, doesn't really matter, and do weird things. And so if you're trying to finesse them around terrain, I recommend mounted, or if they're dismounted, don't put them in loose formation. But in general, when it's time to do the fighting, I would say you usually want to be in loose formation, unless by pushing the units so far out that they're no longer able to shoot. That seems really unlikely to happen, though it could, in which case you would want to keep them in the more compact formation. On the defensive, in loose formation, when the enemy has to come to you, the loose formation makes you about as wide as 2 infantry brigades, and so you're able to cover a lot more front. So if you're outnumbered, this is one of the ways, at least in terms of maintaining your front, you can mitigate that, though generally I don't want cavalry in the kind of middle of my line, but you might be on the end of the line and still dealing with units perhaps that are trying to flank you, and you want to keep them in front of you as best you can. Where the enemy has to come through you because you have become an obstacle, don't forget that you can go prone. Yeah, you lose a bit of range, but you take less damage prone than standing. And since they have to come to you, if they don't come within your arc, then they're going to have to stand outside and shoot. Again, you should be in cover, you should be prone. So you're going to take casualties very slowly, and it's going to buy you time. Right now, you're watching what happens in a situation where you need to buy some time. Now, the high rate of fire is one of the really great things about Cav. It allows them to potentially inflict the high momentary casualties or just the general morale debuff on enemies for taking a lot of casualties because they fire very quickly. That also creates a lot of smoke. Some of it can be inaccurate, and so being in loose formation gives them that accuracy buff that mitigates some of that. But the point is, you can burn through your ammo very easily. I mean, we're looking at Maynard's. It's 12 rounds a minute. Of course, it's not literally 12 rounds in a minute as you're playing the game, but it's scaled so that you're probably going to run out of ammo pretty quickly if you are constantly engaged. When you go to no ammo, remember you actually do have some ammo left. You're just going to fire very, very slowly, but the unit still has combat effectiveness because you can mount up. And when you mount up Cav, you're going to switch to the melee weapon, and it'll tell you, it's telling us right now kind of how things are, but usually you'll see an improvement in the melee when you go from, say, dismounted loose formation into mounted, because generally this is going to be stronger than whatever your medium range carbine is. And you'll be able to move more quickly. You're also going to be more prone to being shot. And so, there's a downside to running out of ammo, but you still have a role to play, and a Cav unit that you don't trust to charge and that's out of ammo is still valuable to keep behind friendly lines so that you give that positive morale buff to your friendlies who are trying to hold. Finally, on the kind of defensive front, another good use for Cav is, if you're familiar with the term, kiting the enemy back. I would generally prefer to do this through open terrain. Too much weird stuff happens when you don't get open terrain. But if you have friendly setup, so say we got Herbert or Haber, whatever his name is, his division here, they're going to be in this tree line, and there's a bit of an open field over here. What we might be able to do with Adams, we'll see how the AI reacts, is to maybe station ourselves somewhere around here, cover the road, cover this. Whichever way the AI goes, we'll try to withdraw back through the woods into our friendlies in the tree line. Generally, you don't. If you can avoid pulling through friendlies, that's to be preferred, because you're going to disrupt them and there are going to be some line of sight and shooting issues. It would be best to kind of drag the enemy back across the face of your friendly infantry. But if you can't manage that, pull back through friendlies. Then you'll get your formation back, and then you can contribute to the fight after that. But Cav are really good at that kind of baiting and kiting. On the attack, it's only a slightly different story. I generally like to have the infantry, either with skirmishers or just the straight up brigades, being in the center, kind of getting chewed up and chewing up in turn, and then keeping the cav on the flank. If I only have 2 cav brigades, I'd prefer to have 1 on each flank rather than to have 2 on one flank and none on the other. And the reason is that when you get these cav units on the flank, even going into the rear, I'm going to recommend that you usually put them in surprise, surprise, loose formation. And so when you get 2 of these things side by side in loose formation, it's a very long front. And so we'll see what we actually get from the AI here, but you can kind of imagine how this is going to go. If you can see that division, if we pull Adams back over here, and so we get the AI to engage us in the front where my cursor is, in loose formation, we're going to be pretty wide. If we had another cav unit in loose formation, it would be out here. It would have to move all the way around, and yeah, it would get into the rear, but it would take a long time to get there. And one of the other downsides about being in loose formation, it seems that those cav units really struggle to deal with attacks on their flank. And so a very long flank like that, it wastes time. I'd rather have it on the other side, even if you're not able to get rear casualties, to be able to get flanking casualties and to be able to get into the fight quickly. That's what I'd like to see on the attack. That's the kind of buzzsaw effect that sometimes you'll hear me talking about in campaigns. Once the cav gets set up on that flank, I try to move them in close. So we'll wait and we'll try to apply this in battle here, but I would not try to engage them and stop at your max range. Sometimes with the AI, as soon as they come in range, they'll stop. You got to give them a new movement order and get them as close as you can on the flank of an enemy unit, because the closer you are, the more accurate you're going to be. And if you can try to hold off shooting, you won't have a lot of your own smoke on the battlefield that's obstructing your guys' aims, and you should be even that much more lethal in those opening volleys. And that's what can put the high morale penalty, the high losses morale debuff on the enemy and make them more likely to break. And then, of course, it's the nature of flanking. Once you get that flank, you get that rearmost brigade to rout, you're then able to take that cav unit and pretty much walk up the rest of their flank, roll it up that way. And if you run out of ammo, you can just have infantry brigades begin to substitute it. And that probably will be your limiting factor, is that you'll probably just burn through your ammo, knocking down those brigades one by one. And if they turn to try to deal with you on the flank, that means that your friendly infantry brigades there are getting flanking fire on them, and it's going to be a bad time. So we're not at the point where we're ready to see it yet, but a final way I think you can use cav. It is legitimate. It's more of, I guess I call an alpha strike, or maybe glass cannon is the appropriate analogy, which would be to keep the general idea of having the infantry line as your anvil, and rather than fighting dismounted and loose, you stay mounted, and what you're looking to do is to quickly come in, most likely in the rear, perhaps fire off 1 or 2 rounds, and then immediately charge into the backside of an enemy infantry brigade, and then try to chain route down the line. If you're able to pull it off, if the terrain is favorable, you don't get mucked up, blocked on fences, on buildings, on water, other terrain features, or the cav just don't randomly bug out, it can be very gratifying, and it can be a way when you're fighting down in terms of overall numbers, you can claw a lot of those numbers back through using that tactic. The problem is that if there is artillery or a second line of infantry back here, and you try to bring cav through. Here, we're just going to mount up now to get into the rear. Most likely, you're just going to get absolutely shreked by whoever is sitting back here. You're going to take horrendous casualties. It's likely going to be in your flank or your rear, and then you're likely to lose those cavalry to routing or have them out of combat when you really need them. And now they're imposing negative morale debuffs on friendlies, and the enemy is doing better because that they've sent your cav running. So I would say don't only pull it off if you want to, or if you just, YOLO and you really don't care. That's perfectly fine. If you want to role play with some reckless commander, absolutely go for that. But I prefer the little bit more conservative approach of just coming in and getting maximum mileage out of those medium range carbines. And before we turn to apply this and kind of show you how I see this working in practice, I would say take a look at your cav perks. So pay no mind to this, but there are really good cav perks out there. I don't know that I can tell you that there is the best one. I generally don't take the melee one because I don't want to be in melee that much. There's one, I think it's still called Stormers or Troopers. It's the one, and I think they removed it from the description, but it's still there in the campaign prefs file. It gives the unit a boost when they are fighting dismounted and in loose formation, which is pretty much always what I'm doing with my cav, and so it's very easy to perk up, and the benefit, I believe, was to accuracy, and so that's one I would definitely want, considering we're shooting really fast and we might otherwise miss a lot because of the smoke and all that other stuff. It's one that I very much like. Another one I absolutely have come to love for cav, it's the one where they perk up because they're fighting in cover. I mean, just look at this map. There's more than enough cover, and because I tend to micro my cav and kind of let everything else more or less sit or use divisional orders, I try to fight from cover almost all the time. And the level 3 of that perk is phenomenal. It increases the value of cover, and I believe it also increases, I think, reload speed with cav. So it is fantastic. So those are the two I really like for cav. So when you do get your one perk to put on the brigade, think about what it is you want that unit to do. And those are the two I recommend most highly. So what you'll see next, that's pretty much the end of the tutorial, or at least the advice part. But what I'll try to show you next is how to apply some of this stuff in a battle setting. All right, so you can see here that the cav completed its kind of primary, or at least the primary objective that it has, which is to scout and keep eyes on the enemy. We weren't able to keep the entire force, but I'm assuming that they're probably being drawn to the victory point, and we can see that they already have some brigades. They sent both infantry and artillery this way, so I expect the full force to come up. Cooper, now I'm playing with kind of all the information on, so Cooper is actually in a lot of trouble. I don't know that I need to kite Cooper or pay that much attention to Cooper, at least not with our cav. So we're going to keep hanging out here and see maybe if we can bait Totten into making some moves that he shouldn't, but we got to be careful that we don't spend too much time out here, that they might have more troops here that will rush across and get our flank or get our rear, and then we're in trouble. All right, so this is a good time to see that plan did not work, right? They're going to come in the back door here, and if we sit out here too long in the middle, we're going to end up exactly where we don't want to be. So we want to be on the flank. We have one division that's getting lined up. We're going to look to join them. Again, we're trying to work with the rest of our army. We're not going to try to be a one brigade army. If you try to do too much of cav, and look, if you've watched campaign, I've already given myself the name of General Killcavalry here, or Second Lieutenant Killcavalry here, because that is what I tend to do. I love what cavalry do, and I rely too much on them, and sometimes I expect more out of them than anybody should, even though I've gotten them killed so many times. So learn from my mistakes. be more conservative than you think you need to be with cavalry until you really have a good handle on them, and then you can be a little bit more ambitious and try some of those riskier moves. But yeah, above all else, try to keep the force together. I do say, though I don't always practice it, it's better to keep the unit around on the battlefield, not having shattered. That way they're at least a potential threat always to the enemy. Whereas if you YOLO and it doesn't work, or it does work and then it doesn't, you've removed yourself as a possible threat. And so I like to keep the possibility of being a threat, particularly with cavalry who have really versatile set of threats in that they can both shoot it out and they are a real danger in melee that artillery and most infantry can't deal with. That you gotta try to keep them in the fight as long as you can, but they require a lot of micro. I've also found that cavalry in particular really get unsettled by artillery. I don't know if that's by design, that it's supposed to kind of mimic the horses getting startled, or what exactly the issue is there. Generally, this is the matchup I prefer to take care of enemy artillery. When the enemy leads with the artillery, you send your skirmishers after them, but you can get cavalry on them. We're going to order Adams up. I've dismounted them because I don't want them riding into the artillery. We might be able to move them to loose. Well, I guess they're going to do it anyways because they're seeing that it's faster. But let's see if we can convince them to move in a different way. We can get there a little bit slower, but we don't want to take a round, say, of canister while we're mounted and just across that stream. And maybe they're now thinking better of it. But if you can get a unit of infantry skirmishers to deal with the problem, it's not worth taking 100, 150 casualties with your cavalry because you wanted them to get those. I would say save your ammo. You really want to be expending that ammo not into enemy artillery, but into enemy infantry, which are the real mortal threats. But you can see a bit of what I was talking about earlier, which is on old Philip here. You're seeing the icon, which tells you that they're getting their morale improved by this cav being nearby. It's not a huge buff, I don't think. So own cavalry close is plus 5%. The supported might be I don't know if that's the infantry or that just the cavalry is here on its flanks. If that's an additional buff, well, it is additional buff, but I don't know if it's because of the cavalry. But it's certainly cavalry here. If there was no one else, I think it would probably help. And so in the morale game, where sometimes both sides are just slugging it out, and it's who breaks first. Having that cavalry give that buff to friendlies is a little bit more advantage. You'll break more slowly, and you can't read all the kind of morale factors that are going on with the enemy. Right? Some things will tell you, but not everything. But here we know, and it's probably the cav that's doing it, we've outflanked the artillery. I don't think we're putting very many casualties in it. We're shooting through the woods at something of a long distance here. But I think it's being flanked and probably knowing that cavalry is close that's already making that battery think better of staying in this engagement there. All right, and they actually just routed from a combination of that light pressure and us being near their flanks. And so what we can do, since I'm pretty sure our left is clear, we can move into this tree line. We don't want to move too quickly because I kind of want to see if we can bait in some of this infantry. But if they don't move quickly and this flank goes poorly, we know we're going to have to move, and we'll react. Alright, so I don't see too much else going on over here, and so we're holding a lot of friendly infantry back that could be supporting some sort of harassment. I mean, the AI has done us a little bit of a favor by bunching themselves up, but there is what appears to be a kind of isolated infantry unit out here, and now they see us and they're turning to us. We want to make sure we're in loose formation to make that hurt as little as possible. Now, because we have friendly infantry nearby, we can see that if they try to turn too hard to us, we're going to get flanking fire. If they stay right where they are and they want to shoot it out with our skirmishers, that is more than fine with us. It's a trade we got to be happy with. But our goal here is to get a break over here, and then they're kind of funneled into the road here. Yeah, they have more back here, but we don't need to be too worried about that just yet. Remember, this is all part of a delay strategy, and so the first bit of that appears to be paying off, and actually we have more cavalry, and so not exactly sure where we're gonna need them, but we'll send Stuart's 1 Brigade division out there. We'll send up, Floyd has a division, looks like we're probably gonna need them there. Frost has one as well. We might need them back there. We'll take their artillery out when it gets there, but we're here to take a look at cavalry. So I think this unit has committed far enough up that we're gonna make a push over here. What we want to do, because we are working with other friendly units, is we want to try to keep them engaged in this front, so that we can run up on their flank, do our thing, and get out of there. So you can see they're outflanked. Again, it's a combination. It's not just because of the cavalry. And you see also they stopped, in my view, way too early. Right? They kind of stopped just when they were in range. We want to be moving up closer. These guys shooting from range is fine, because this was just to try to hold them where they are. And now they've run. Fine by us. Might be an opportunity with the... Again, don't get greedy. I would not recommend, if you're new to the game in cavalry, I would not recommend to saddle up and get ready to charge. I'm just keeping the option open. What I'm thinking actually is that this cav unit might be more useful in harrying some of these reinforcements and slowing them down. But we got to see what we're given. And we're going to send the other infantry over here, so they're in a position to maybe bail us out if or when things go wrong. We shall see. But that's where things stand at the moment. All right, we don't have Cooper in yet. All right, so what I did was so I'm stuck with these cross swords. It's another glitch that cavalry have. And I wasn't moving, but I still want to move over here. So what I'm doing is I'm giving them a charge order, so it's going to have us move, you can see, at the double quick. And rather than actually go through and complete that charge, which I have no intention of doing, we're going to come over here, and we're gonna stop that. We're going to get down, we're going to get loose. I'll be honest, I'm being more aggressive than I should be. I know I've told you to be conservative about all of this. But there is a good chance that this artillery is going to run through our flank, and it isn't going to feel great. But I want to show what cavalry can do. And so we want to engage these guys back here. We don't really want to engage at a distance. This is kind of an active defense. We want to stop those reinforcements from getting up here. Hopefully these guys will just get bogged down in casualties. And we do have a full corps coming in to support this position, and we now have these brigades who are supporting from a distance the defense over here, and we're going to hold one of these brigades back in case we need to pull through this field. It will be sitting here and ready to shoot whoever's up there. But we can keep an eye on our casualties. They're not too bad. We're almost in the middle of our range, so that might be at about 200 yards. But that's through a relatively open field. We should be doing pretty good work against them. If we're ever not sure, we can check and see what's weighing on our morale. Alright, on the right, Cooper's Cav, It's tempting to want to send them right through the woods and immediately try to bail out this position. I can lose that entire division, and we'll still be in an okay situation on the map. If anything, I want to get a little bit more aggressive here, but I don't yet see any infantry coming down our flank. But what I'm thinking about with Cooper is that maybe we run up here, and then we make a move into the woods. This is risky whenever you put Cav in the woods like that, but I think it'll buy some time for the other infantry divisions here to get where they need to be, and we can actually order them up here. We're just gonna, and again, it's more about getting the artillery out of it, so it's one less thing to micromanage later on. If you can take care of it while they're on the move, then you can focus more on moving your cavalry when you're in battle. For me, it's just, get the infantry in the right place and some cover, artillery, give them the best spot you can. We'll do separate tutorials for them. Definitely just misclicked there, and I detached an entire division, but, it happens. Did we give up? So we did give, I think we gave up our flank when we turned to move like that. Mistakes happen. Alright, so eventually we're going to turn here and we're going to remove that flanking fire. There is a time lapse. Under artillery fire, it's just going to stay there. But you can see that even with flanking fire knocking us down 25%, artillery fire 5%, we're actually still improving our morale because of other things. And you can read what those are. So that infantry, okay, so they look like they're still broken. I was going to say, if they were not broken and trying to rally, I would be a lot more concerned than I am. Our casualties are still pretty low. We have a long way to go in our lost resilience, and so I'm happy to stand here and continue to trade and try to hold up anybody who is trying to reinforce this attack. Cooper's over here. Yeah, and Cooper's about to come in, and he might be able to get a chain route started. So I'm going to do the same thing. It's stuck. Whenever you see those crossed swords, it means it's going to be a charge. We're not going to do that because remember, you always have the halt option. But it does allow you to move very quickly towards an enemy, and that's something you want. Bonham is wounded. He's one of the infantry. I think he's the brigade commander down there. But yeah, we're going to move in as quickly as we can. I guess they still have flanking fire. Alright, we can try to remove that. We might end up taking artillery fire in the rear, but at least for now, it will remove that penalty. We could also use this opportunity if we wanted to take fewer casualties. We could go prone, and we could see that this unit is still well within our arc of fire, and we're just trying to kind of tie them down. I've sent this brigade out maybe further than is advisable, but it is what it is. Alright, now Cooper's getting very close, being able to engage. I think at that range, we want to dismount them and get them in loose formation. And as we move up a little bit closer, we're going to give them the halt order and just let them start shooting. Yep, and they're firing, so that's good. I've changed the settings in here to make it a little bit harder for me to actually know how many casualties I've done, so it may well be more than 500, but it may not, but we've done better than 2-to-1 casualties so far. But yeah, we'll let this brigade continue to engage this artillery. It's not the best engagement, but this way we'll see what Cav are able to do on their own. We made it this far. Again, this is the kind of wonkiness of some of the Cav movement, but I want to move them in close. Something's bugged out here in the cover, and that unit is definitely in a forest, but it's not reporting any. Just go with it. Alright, you can see they don't like what they're getting. But they're going to continue to get it, and yeah, the rest of the battle's a bit challenged. Alright, we can order them up there. Alright, you got to see a little bit of how Cav can work on the attack. If you're in campaign and you want to run up the score on the hapless AI, when they start to rout, you mount up, you left alt so you get those cross swords, and then you actually charge them in. I generally never would want to actually charge into a unit that is facing me. You would do it in the flank or you would do it in the rear, but we're just in garbage time and we're at the end of the tutorial where I'm just trying to show you what some of this stuff might look like. And here's a perfect example of the AI kind of bugging out. Right? You saw them mount up real quick. They did nothing. We gave them a charge order and they just stood there while they were being shot at by 1 or 2 brigades. Now they kind of know what to do, but they probably took 75 extra casualties just to do that. But yeah, these guys can knock down those wavering units. And yeah, that's how you run up the score on the AI, so you'll end up capturing a lot more weapons, taking a lot more POWs, inflicting a lot more casualties. So that'll give you even more mileage out of these already overpowered Cav. Alright, that's all I'm going to say for Cav. It went long, but hopefully now, if you don't know how to use them, you have a much better idea than you did. And good luck to you out there, and we'll bring you more of these on how to use different branches and do different things.